And we move on now to the presentation from Timo. And Timo, as you probably all know, is the new team leader for advanced light microscopy technology development and service provision here at the EMBL Imaging Centre. After spending 13 years in Barcelona, where he established and headed the CRG Advanced Light Microscopy unit. So he is very experienced in building up a facility and a service center and closely working with companies in this context. And please, Timo, go ahead with your presentation.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. And yeah, thanks for the opportunity to introduce the newest member maybe to the mix of actually these very interesting models that we have now already seen and are continuing to see. So what I want to do is introduce the EMBL Imaging Centre, which is a very new undertaking on the EMBL campus in Heidelberg that is located in the field of imaging, both on the side of electron microscopy as well as light microscopy, and that I think shares some of the mechanisms and also needs and problems of core facilities, but also aims to be something very special, because I think most of you know that EMBL has excellent core facilities in place. So I try to bring across what we want to do and how this actually also should, of course, really be embedded in the community and in the companies. So without further ado, let's see if I can, okay, it works. I want to just say something about the EMBL Imaging Centre. So the idea is to provide access to the latest light and electron microscopy technologies. And this really means access for everybody. Maybe a fundamental operational difference to, let's say, the core facility concept, which grows inside an institute and is aimed mainly at the institute itself. This time access is meant very much, of course, in line with the mission statement of Euro-BioImaging, to be open access for people from all over the world that have need for this. And open access, external access actually comes with its own challenges, which is reflected in the way that you can support a project. You need to have much more preparation on the ground to be able to execute it. And this needs to be reflected in the staff composition of your team and the way that you actually then execute the preparation phase of the planning phase of the experiment, the acquisition as well as the analysis phase. Additionally, this is aimed at, which I'm going to describe a little bit later, at the gap that you have normally between the innovation and the implementation. So we want to contribute, this is I think also relevant inside the context of this meeting, to the innovation and to the effective commercialization of new imaging technologies. So this is something I can cover on the slides afterwards. And importantly, as also already mentioned, sharing knowledge is very important. So advanced user as well as research infrastructure staff training is something that is also very much in our mission statement. I think it is very much aligned with many of the goals of Euro-BioImaging, because clearly there's also a lot of, let's say, spiritual overlap in this. So these are all important things, and it is aiming in this to be a unique infrastructure. It has, I think, a lot of potential, and of course this is something that I also experienced for the first time, to actually now bring a building to life that was specifically designed for imaging. So it is more or less 6,000 square meters of area that you can consider dedicated to imaging on 3 floors. And I can, of course, not go too much into the technical specifications, but I want to point out some, because they are really unique. The building is modular. I think this is really helpful. It is a separate building on the campus. And it was built exclusively for imaging. So therefore, you don't have the challenge of having a whole institute that is built anew, and you have to compromise with every single department to be able to accommodate everything. This was planned for one purpose, and I think this shows. And for example, it's maybe best exemplified by the foundation. that protects against vibration. I mean, we're all aware that vibration is problematic for any form of imaging, and the higher the resolution goes, the more it is so. I mean, this is clearly the case for electron microscopy. It is, of course, also the case for light microscopy, because the closer we look, the more of these problems we actually encounter. So therefore, the fact that we are having many of the instrument rooms, all of the EM rooms and many of the light microscopy rooms on a foundation, that's basically a slab of concrete that is supported by pillars that completely separated from the ground, is, I think, very important. And it's a huge structure. So it's 27 times 27 meters of concrete that support the EM instrument rooms, as well as some of the light microscopy rooms. And as you can see, also the EM structure, because cryo-EMs are big, actually extends over 2 floors. So it goes also into the top floor. We, in addition, have the latest climate and temperature, so temperature and humidity controls. And this is not something I'm showing specifically, but I would, so more or less here on the side, do you see my mouse? Maybe just, Claudia, maybe just wave your hand if you see it. Okay, good. I'm not going to use the pointer, then I'm going to use the mouse. Here in this area, we have like 300 square meters of supporting technology. So basically the air conditioning units, the power supplies, which is very important, because if you think now about the latest developments in electron microscopy, but more and more also in light microscopy, cryo-imaging becomes very important. Cryo-imaging suffers from humidity. So we have humidity control. We can dehumidify large parts of the building and of the instrument rooms and of the preparation rooms, either to 20% or to 10%. So therefore, this is already foreseen, and it gives us a lot of stability, also, of course, in temperature, which is absolutely essential for optical equipment. So really, there's a lot that is possible. It's illustrated here maybe with just some pictures of the main electron microscopy rooms, which you see are extending over 2 floors and are really defining structure, which also shows more or less where the foundation of the building is and the level of support for imaging that is actually reflected in the building. So I think this is just visually telling exactly what the building is about. We have, so I try to add this right away. We have spaces, a lot of spaces that are really dedicated to imaging. So we have light microscopy spaces in yellow. So you already have seen the ones here, also the ones for electron microscopy. We have, and this is where the open access concept comes into play. We have preparation spaces for experiments of the users, because if users travel, they need also, for many applications, the possibility to actually execute the experiments on site, to prepare them, to optimize them. And for this, we have a large area, both for LM as well as for EM preparation, that can support experiments. In this context, I can also mention that the concept of S2 was already mentioned, that this is something that, for example, is not very easily supportable inside a company, because S2 labs have very strong specifications. The planning, this is a very new building. We're moving into it in May, so we're still setting up, but we can actually separate a whole area of the building for S2 operation with its own preparation spaces here. I'm just going back here. So we really have all these possibilities and can then separate and dedicate also S2 functionality where needed. This is also the case for the electron microscopy rooms, which can be optionally treated as S2 spaces. Okay, here just some of the impressions that we're now filling the building. This is, of course, a long undertaking. It should also not be done in one go. It should grow. It should actually follow the needs. But we already have a lot of high-end equipment on the ground. And this is the case both for the light microscopy side as well as for the electron microscopy side. It is a mix of different concepts of, I would say, highest level systems that are commercially available. That's part of the portfolio that we're now establishing. It is partially also systems that I would say are somewhere at the edge, which really, really need support, which I do not see as a given in a core facility, and where I would think people have to be very careful in planning if they want to have really high-end services. I think this is the case both for light microscopy as well as for electron microscopy, and also custom developments, which should aid in the technology transfer from research groups, development groups, to the user in the end. And this is something I will show on a slide. But you see, we're setting up. We have more and more on the ground. Here you see basically the bottom plate for the cryoconfocal and the size of the space that can be dedicated to it. So I really think we have good conditions to offer best possible imaging. Also important and already covered is training and outreach. So we have clearly a very strong technical area, which is the one that is for me, of course, essential and which provides the great attraction to actually do this. And we have also a public area, which is, of course, aimed at training and outreach. So there's a large auditorium that can accommodate approximately 80 people, I would say, in different configurations. You can make it with desks, you can make it seating only. You have seminar rooms or meeting rooms, you have a large seminar room, you have several meeting rooms also in other parts of the building closer to the instruments, and also a public area which can be used in context of these training activities and which will also be the exhibition space to actually show the power of molecular biology and of imaging. So I think there's really a lot to be done also on the outreach side. And this is, I think, very important to consider that targeted training activities are actually really possible. So coming back to the project support idea, I think this really needs to be taken seriously, that you have to develop, if you want to give open service to a large community that's not only local, you have to think out how to do it. I think what we have learned in the Corona crisis is not only electron microscopy samples travel well, also some of the light microscopy samples work just fine. So we have started pilot operation already some time ago, and we actually are using samples from external users. But in this case, it's only the sample that travels. That's only part of the idea. The other idea is, of course, to have sample preparation covered in the preparation rooms, both for LM as well as for EM, image acquisition in all its forms, and importantly, given the complexity of the workflows, also data analysis. So we have, and this is shown here on the next slide, the teams that we're setting up are actually structured. So we have a team on the light microscopy side that I'm currently heading, and a team on the cryo-EM side that is headed by my counterpart, Simone Mattei, and we are coordinating the activities with a service support manager. But in addition, the teams themselves contain many experts, but in different forms, in the form of EM and optical engineers, which are very important to support high-end operation, in the form of microscopy application specialists, which are really needed for the complex workflows, and also by image data analysts that actually can help the user in the end make the most of their data, not just the acquisition. So you see, it is supposed to reflect the whole workflow, and this is what we're aiming for. Actually, maybe just as a plug, the teams are still forming. I still need an optical engineer, so I will probably very shortly announce the position again. And or if people want to contact me, this would be very interesting. We can offer services in light microscopy, cryo-electron microscopy, and we are also setting the services up, which is of course very complex because it bridges two fields in correlative cryo-electron microscopy, so cryoclam. And these, I think, are all applications that are very well located in the imaging center as it is meant to be. On the light microscopy side, we will logically, I think, start at high resolutions. This is where I said it's a growing organism, but I was thinking logically, it makes sense to position ourselves very close to one of the features of EM that we all need, which is high resolution. So we have a very strong interest in super resolution techniques. We actually cover a wide range of them. So basically the optical based ones, and also stimulated emission depletion, single molecule localization microscopy, and also minimal photon fluxes, so min-flux. So these are techniques that we are more or less now already offering or can offer for service and have established over the last year. We can also work with different illumination regimes, so for different thicknesses, so multi-photon, single photon turf, it will be covered. And of course, considering that labels are a big part of the effect, different labeling regimes with different principles are important to really gain the most out of the machines. And since we have these integrated teams, this is also things we can support. On the side of EM, which is also, let's say, the second part of the imaging center, sample vitrification, cryofit milling, data collection, so 10 data collection, and also volume imaging are the services that we have set up or are in the process of setting up. You see already in both cases, you see industrial partners, which are for us very important, and we are very strongly and very gratefully supported by companies in the field. So in the light microscopy side at the moment, it's instruments from Leica and Aberio, and also on the EM side, where also, let's say, Thermo Fisher on the Zeiss and Leica are, say, covering different aspects of the different processes. Now, importantly, I think where the common interest lies is how to close the technology gap between technology development and the scientific impact. So the challenge is that we have limited access to the latest imaging technologies, and that it's not only enough to have a good idea and to have it implemented on optical table, but to make it really accessible to scientists actually takes quite long. We have seen this happen. This can take several years. 10 years is not completely unrealistic for complex techniques. And this is something that we, of course, try to somehow bridge. In this case, the idea is to bring the scientific impact closer by very good support of the new developments. This can be for academic developments. So you know probably that EMBL has actually developing groups, and the imaging center can act as a conduit for these ideas and bring them closer to the field, because the developer groups, they cannot support external access very much. So we can do this for different forms of imaging, that inside the LM or EM service teams, we do the service establishment and then can provide the service provision. That's a very fundamental concept. And this is something that we're already in the process of implementing. And I think also importantly, the same problem, the same challenge, actually even possibly more so, exists for the companies. Also there, the idea to bring the developments closer to the scientific impact early on is, I think, an important one, and where we can offer joint and integrated development and application testing, and therefore a new model of interaction and user support, where we can try to close the gap, or where we can close the gap between R&D and application. I think what you have seen is it is an ideal testing environment where we can really also do or accommodate next generation imaging technologies. And something that Alberto was saying, possibly even one could try also in different fields to act as a conduit for connecting different technologies, if that is, for example, very useful. The access will be provided in different forms. In the form of direct access, so we're setting up an interface where people can apply with the projects. We are basically not operating as a time renting facility, but the idea is people should come with the projects. We will help them in executing their projects, and of course also be connected to the powerful research infrastructures that are also interested in giving open access. This can be on the structural side, so Instruct, of course, Euro-BioImaging. I mean, I don't have to say much here. We are in the process of being added to the EMBL node of Euro-BioImaging, and we would really like to use this as a major and powerful conduit, and funded access schemes, which are very important also to allow people to actually make use of the potential that we've seen also in the last presentations. We are more or less at the start of our operation. We are currently doing a lot of new pilot user projects in the new building. The building has now been opened, or is in the process of being opened, and we will very soon, so not October, but November, release our first open call for projects, where we hope that we can provide these exciting opportunities. And with this, I'm at the end. I'm sorry I went a bit over time. I have a lot of people in principle to thank. So the LM and EM teams, the people that made it possible on the organizational side and making it really happen. So yeah, thanks a lot for your attention.
Thank you very much, Timo, for this nice introduction to the Imaging Center. Even though we're a bit behind schedule, I would like to pose one question to you that came from the chat as well. Since the Imaging Center is now open and for all, and you will have the first users, and you mentioned the importance of training as well, do you plan to establish a sort of user community or user exchange platform where also the different users can interact and maybe get in touch with experts? or maybe something where you can invite early stage career researchers as well that would benefit most from the experience that's accumulated at the Imaging Center?
I think the offer to actually host people is a very exciting one. So that definitely should be one of the things that we can do. I think this can also be discussed in the context of job sharing activities. Sharing in different levels should be possible. In how to actually interact or provide the knowledge, I have to evaluate this. We're still a growing organism. We should also find good ways to do some things. We should not try to reinvent the wheel, where there's maybe very active communities there. I think the whole meeting is about networking. So I think it is maybe more important to properly establish yourself in some communication channels and be as open as possible inside these channels, and then work like this and work accordingly. So yeah, I mean, this I have to see, but we will be very open to actually help people in gaining knowledge. This can be on-site, this can be in any kind of form of communication.
Okay, thanks a lot, Timo. We have a few more questions in the Q&A, which we can either address after the meeting or later in the panel discussion, but because I would like to move on to our next speakers now.